Hello and welcome back. We are going to be looking at addictions, what the origin beliefs behind addictions are, where these psychological patterns came from, these false beliefs came from, and also towards the end of the video, I'm going to be going into the work of Dr. Michael Lincoln, offering about 5 insights into the origin beliefs and the formative experiences that form the patterns of addictive behavior. Now, first of all, what are addictions? Well, addictions are a behavioral pattern that we can find ourselves unconsciously dealing with that takes over our behaviors without our conscious level of awareness. Now, this is something I have been working through. I've worked through for the majority of my adult life. I would say actually the majority of my adult life, I was operating unconsciously through addictive behavior. It was substances, alcohol. I'm sure other aspects of my life had a very strong correlation with addictive behavioral patterns. But then, of course, in the later years, and this is why I also talk about this work, I have worked through the addictions and also the patterns that I have broken on my own came from my own work. I hadn't worked with a specialist for addictions. I had done this work on my own. So my hope is with this video is to give you the information that you need to take the self-mastery in your own hands, if you feel called to it, to break the patterns within yourself. Knowing that depending on where you are in your life, your own personal story, there may be different aspects that you are going to experience that maybe I hadn't experienced or other people hadn't experienced and so on. So you have your own experience, your own stories, your own interweb of beliefs and patterns that will require your own inner observation, that will require you to observe your inner self in your own unique way. Of course, you can work with a specialist, you can work with someone for help to break some patterns of addictive behavior, but also I would encourage you to incorporate potentially, if these resonate with you, some of these tools and techniques as well to apply them to your own practice for yourself, because the origin of addictions actually goes deeper and more expansive with our relationship with our higher self and with the cosmos and with life itself. Now, you don't need to be a spiritual person to work through addictions. I know my channel does have a bit of a spiritual or a very significant spiritual tone. However, the connection with our true self, our whole self, is part of the story, which I'm going to get to later on in this video. So first of all, what are addictions? Addictions are when we are operating unconsciously. It is a psychological behavioral response to beliefs that are stored within our unconscious. And the beliefs have been ingrained since early life. Now, if you want to go really deep into this, you can bring some of the beliefs in from past life. Yes, you can also inherit some of the beliefs from your family and even some of the emotional complexities of your mother while being in the womb. I'm going to get into that later in this video, but addictions are when we are responding to a certain action unconsciously. This is when we will have a very unconscious response to do something where we all of a sudden feel very separated from our deeper self. And the double-edged sword with this is, how do we even know what the connection with our true self feels like if we may not have felt it before? So that's where this can become very tricky. That's where it can become very complex, is starting to connect with that feeling of our true self. What does that even feel like? What does it feel like to feel trust, to feel whole, to feel connected with our higher self if we may not have felt that before? When we are influenced by our unconscious false beliefs that are inspiring addictive behavior, like I said, it's very unconscious. We may not realize that we're doing it, but what it feels like is it feels like a very strong impulse to do something. And it would be a repeated pattern. And substances, alcohol, drugs, sex, pornography, social media, dating, relationships, being close to someone, can't be alone. Whatever this need is, it can be shopping, it can be gaming, it can be any kind of impulsive reaction to a life situation. If someone's feeling lonely or bored or uncertain or confused, whatever the case may be, angry, mad, sad, glad, there can be emotional responses to addictive behavior. There can be psychological responses to behavioral patterns of addictions. So again, this is when we are pulled away from ourselves, or we are impulsively needing something and going to something and doing something. And this moment is where we are pulled away from feeling in the present moment, feeling into our body, being connected with our body, being connected with our deeper self. But that is truly one of the false beliefs, which I'll get to later in this video, of why these patterns are actually occurring in the first place. Just as a recap, addictions are when we become dependent on various substances or behaviors to cope with life. And as I mentioned, this can be very under the surface, or it can be very, very much a level of awareness where we can realize that we are turning to certain substances because maybe we're unhappy, maybe we're angry, maybe we're sad, maybe we're bored. So we may turn to some of these behavioral patterns and these addictive behaviors because of any of these trigger responses that may happen consciously or unconsciously. So we can pinpoint in a level of awareness when these reactions are happening, or we can be completely consumed by our unconscious, where we are in these patterns without even realizing it. So the types of addictions can be substance addictions, such as drugs or alcohol, behavioral addictions, such as gambling, sex, shopping, and emotional addictions, such as people pleasing or workaholism. The psychological and emotional impact when under the influence of these behavioral patterns of addiction are a temporary fix. So it's something where we can lean towards, where we may feel a moment of gratification or relief, or numbing out of maybe some kind of difficulty. But what happens during the state is it's very temporary. And unfortunately, what happens after the behavioral pattern has run its course, it will leave the person feeling even worse, or can certainly trigger an even more severe response afterwards. Now, I'm sure there are chemical responses. If you want to get into drugs and alcohol substances, there are chemical imbalances that are created through the highs and the lows of addicted patterns. Even if it is a physical response, such as shopping or sex, pornography, gaming, social media. Again, there's going to be a different type of chemical response associated with those patterns afterwards that will not have as strong as an effect per se, but it depends on where the person is at within their emotional complexities. However, these very temporary moments that we can find ourselves in or attracted to for a fix or for a certain level of comfort or escapism will only be temporary, leaving the person afterwards feeling even possibly potentially even worse than before. So this is the toxic cycle that addictive behavioral patterns can pull us into, are these states of wanting to numb out, wanting a relief, wanting a fix, but then feeling even worse afterwards. So especially for substances, there's going to be a very heavy biological response to it as far as a hangover or withdrawals. On the physical aspect, if it is a physical response such as shopping or working too much or eating too much even, there's going to be a different kind of response. This could even have to do with one's lifestyle. All of them will have to do with certain lifestyle repercussions. However, they're going to be different repercussions. It just is up for us to be aware of what are the repercussions as the result of these addictive behaviors. So again, if it is going to be substances, then there's going to be a certain repercussion to the causation of one's choice or one's addictive patterns. If it is going to be something of a behavioral response or a physical response, again, the shopping or the social media, watching television, eating too much, there's going to be a negative consequence for that as well. And you can even think of incorporating the law of cause and effect into this. Now, this is a very universal law. This is something that I talk about a lot as well. Just knowing that every choice that we make, every reaction, every action we take has some kind of external consequence or some kind of external result. And so it's difficult sometimes when you're in the grips of addictive behavior. Sometimes it's difficult to really understand the pull and the drive and the motivation towards addictive responses, which I'll get to in a moment, of the actual origin beliefs behind them. But if we have a little bit of wiggling room to be aware and conscious and opening the door, we can start to work through breaking these layers down into bite-sized segments to chip away at some of these behaviors, these addictive behaviors. So the patterns of addictions can generally stem from unmet needs, feeling that one's needs are not met, which can eventually then turn into a mechanism for coping or for survival. And so these origin beliefs become very ingrained and very difficult to see, although they operate very unconsciously, inspiring these perpetual cycles until we can observe them, until we can see them and understand what what is happening within our behavior, how we can break some of these cycles, which I'll get to in another video of the 5 steps of how to slowly chip away at these patterns. But let's go into some of the behavioral patterns or the origin of these behavioral patterns from the work of Dr. Michael Lincoln and where they started. The first example is going to be survival strategy, so adapting to a hostile environment. So the origin belief would be, I must adapt to survive in a dangerous or unpredictable world. This belief developed from growing up in an environment where survival depended on adapting to dysfunction, hostility, or chaos, leaving the individual feeling trapped. So this pattern could have developed as a coping mechanism and as a survival mechanism where the child had to blend in with the family patterns or in some way adopted a behavioral pattern of survival, which led to the addictive process. Now, this could be one example. I'm only giving these as very light examples in the book of Messages from the Body. There are many examples under addiction. These are just a few that I'm giving here. And I'm going to actually end the 5th one with the most universal message, and I'll go a bit deeper in that because that's going to deserve a lot more discussion. The second example is self-reassurance, so seeking external power and validation. The origin belief could be, I am powerless and unable to navigate the challenges of life. This developed during formative experiences in a family dynamic that undermined competence and created feelings of inadequacy, causing a need for external sources of power. So in this particular case, a person who has had their power stripped away, who has felt powerless and helpless in their formative years, would use the addictive process as a means to regain power and control in some kind of way. It may take a little while to wrap one's mind around this one because it almost seems almost like a counter approach in a way, where being in the addictive process is very much being out of control. However, when we are operating unconsciously by these behavioral and emotional patterns, having some sense of control over something that we're doing will reinforce this notion that we need to feel powerful, that we need our power back, that we can control something, that we can that we have ownership, control, or power over a certain situation. So, and this could be even taken into other areas of life, not just addictions. The next one is love substitute. So seeking love from external sources. The belief could be, I am undeserving of love and connection. This could come from an early emotional neglect or rejection, especially from the mother, creating abandonment anxiety and seeking love in unhealthy ways. This may also really become exacerbated when someone feels lonely. So when someone is alone, single, they may turn unconsciously to addictive behavioral patterns in order to fill that void. And this again can be very under the surface where someone may not exactly realize that it's happening, or it can be conscious and someone may be aware of this pattern and the reason why it's happening. But this is a very common one where the addictive process fills a void for one's emotional loss within themselves or the disconnection with themselves. And this is going to go into the final one. So I'm going to explain this in more detail in number 5. The 4th one is my lifeline, dependence on external reassurance. The origin belief could be I am unsafe and at constant risk without external reassurance. This could have developed from a severely dysfunctional family that left the individual to their own devices, fostering a deep fear of uncertainty and need for external stability. So it kind of goes into the last one, into number 3, where there is a need for external love or external validation or a sense of feeling safe. And again, it also ties into the one of control. This can be a substitute when someone is facing inner turmoil, as they are seeking reassurance or stability in some kind of way. So the addictive process could be part of that pattern. And again, this is very under the surface, very unconscious, where someone might be seeking a level of comfort in their life. Now, the 5th one is feeling terribly separated from the source. So the origin belief is I am unworthy of divine love and acceptance. This came from a formative experience of a profound sense of isolation and alienation due to a severe emotional deprivation. leading to an ongoing search for a sense of wholeness and spiritual connection in all the wrong places. Okay, so this one is probably one of the more universal ones. This is what I've experienced within myself. And over the years of doing this work, so just as a background for the work that I do, I have been working on the belief psychology, if you will, the mind-body connection for almost 5 years. And during this work, I had been grappling with an addictive process of my own. When I really started to understand this work, I was putting into practice the awareness, the relationship with the level of awareness regarding the connection with my higher self and the universe and how disconnected I truly felt. Now, this came from a lot of inner work. It took quite several years to understand how this felt within myself. And when I went to turn to an addictive process, I then started to realize how separated from myself I truly was, even though I was very spiritual, I was very aligned, it was pretty healthy. All of that doesn't really matter when you go deeper into this practice and when you start working with your unconscious self and these belief systems. So I started realizing how separated I was from my higher self, from trusting the universe, which I talk about a lot because I feel many of us have lost trust with the connection with the universe, with our higher self, and with all. And so this particular message is when we are looking for love in all the wrong places. We're searching for that cosmic connection. We're searching for the connection with our higher self because many of us don't know what it feels like. And if we have been trapped in an addictive process, we may feel that that is where love resides because we get that hit, we get that rush, we get that change of pace, the change of feelings, and the searching for something that the addictive process can possibly fulfill for a very temporary moment in time, but it actually doesn't. It's a skewed and distorted perception on fulfillment. So the cosmic connection, this is also going very deep. When we are being born into this reality, into this life, we come from source. We come from all that is. We move through the bridge of the cosmic life or cosmic connection into human form. And that bridge in the mother's womb is where we start to integrate real world influences, real world emotions, real world beliefs, the hardship of life, the mother's emotions, the mother's beliefs, and even generational trauma that's being passed down during that process. That is where we are integrating and starting to feel and starting to sense the realities of this lifetime. Now, if you want to get really deep, you can also think about what has been brought in from your incarnations of past experiences on this planet. And so we can look at it in many different forms, but I feel this one here, this number 5, is very universal, where many of us have lost that connection with the higher realms, our higher self, if you will, the true connection with unconditional love, which is part of the goal of my videos, is to bring us back into that connection, to understand first where we have lost the connection, how we have lost the connection, and what the loss of connection is creating in our life, so we can almost reverse and backtrack and then connect with all that is, with the love within ourselves and the connection with our higher self. So this one is where we have lost that connection with the cosmos, with the divine, with our higher self, and we're searching for it, but we're searching outward rather than inward. So this does take quite a bit of wrestling and quite a bit of inner work to understand what that relationship with our higher self feels like and what that means, and start to integrate it into ourself. So with that said, if you are working through addictions of any kind, please follow the video as listed here into the 5 steps for overcoming addictions, where I will break down 5 simple steps that you can integrate into your practice, into your routine, into your daily habits for self-observation and self-mastery, so you can understand the relationship with addictions. And remember, don't be hard on yourself if you're facing this. It has taken me a long time of my own inner work to understand my relationship with addictions and where it came from, and then also cultivating a more meaningful relationship with my inner, deeper self. Do not feel ashamed or guilty. This is one aspect that I actually was grappling with for a long time. I would feel guilty. I would feel ashamed if I went back into some of my old patterns. This is simply an exercise of rewiring our behavioral patterns and our biology. Because these beliefs go very deep, it takes quite a bit of time, some more than others. Mine took quite a bit of time, but it allowed me to understand more about myself. This is the true beauty of it. And maybe for some of you, you'll be able to help other people or teach other people based on the experience that you will go through during this process. So check out my other video on the 5 steps of how to work through addictions to break the patterns. So I hope this offered a bit more guidance on your journey and beyond. I also have a podcast dissecting the work of Dr. Michael Lincoln in great detail. There is a lot of information under addictions and the origin beliefs. They are in the self-mastery membership. So please do find me over there. There's a lot going on over at Substack. And I'm wishing you all the best on your path forward and beyond. Until next time, take care.